Welcome, everyone. Dr. Thor here. Get ready for Gnosis. Well, in my continuing lectures on consciousness radionic machines, we need to get into an important area that seems to have been ignored, passed over. And it's actually very annoying because nobody talks about what makes this technology work. And they take the cop out. The cop out is that, oh, it's a mind process. It's only the mind. So, well, I don't buy that at all. And of course, if it is the mind, we need to learn how to amplify it, channel it, etc. That's called radionics. Now, is there something else there? Well, with the recent breakthroughs and the understanding now of the occultons, the energetic informational energy fields that form all matter. You create an occulton energy field that tells physical matter what to do. Make something, destroy something, whatever it is. I mean, this is a breakthrough that I don't think people quite understand. And this has been going on for a long time, but I don't think anybody's really explained it in the manner that I have. Hopefully, with my many lectures that you should check out on occultons and psions, you get it. This is the essence of the world. It's all there. And what's frightening about it is that not only all the things we've heard for years, you're in control of your own destiny, what you think manifests, well, we've kind of proved it. But you got to remember, don't look at that in a comic book Hollywood way. Even though a trained person with the right equipment could get to the levels of what I always use, comic book realities, which are kind of frightening. And maybe at the stages right now that some governmental agencies that have the money to put in this possibly have. This is basically a nuclear bomb that is now in the hands of the average person if they know what to do and how to do it. Now, that's quite frightening. But, of course, governments haven't done any better. I'm not a big fan of governmental structures because, governmental structures is like taking black paint and then adding white into it to think that somehow you're going to reform it. When you get a bunch of people together, things turn black, negative. Just the way it is, that's the cosmos. That's what's set up by this negative reality we live in. And explained better in a Gnostic viewpoint, which you can look that up. But you can pour as much white paint into black as you want. It never becomes white. So this is the problem. So should there be a decentralization of power? Well, that's right. We have to go the other direction. It always was thought that grouping together would help, but all that does is get a lot of people together that are all corrupt. So you have to have these rogue states, so to speak, that go out there and balance up the situations out there. So that's why I'm strongly in favor of citizens having tanks, mortars, bazookas, etc. Let the government know that if they go too far, that they're going to have to pay a price. So that's what a well-regulated militia is for you Americanos out there. So the whole idea is that we need to understand that this is the essence of everything. It's quite fascinating because all of these theories have now been proved through some recent discoveries I've made. And where do you go from there? And of course, the people involved in these technologies are all low-level people that don't quite get it. And I'm not, but that's how it is in most of life. Right? Who has control of these things? What are they doing? What so forth? Who knows? So, but this is a fact. One of the problems with the entire, as I started, it was the first person to offer, IGOS was the first organization to offer courses, machines, helmets, all sorts of very low-level psychotronic technologies based in non-physical or illness-based use. Now, radionics has generally been there for treating disturbances in the subtle energy fields of human beings to heal them. While it's also got into other areas. I have a very unique little machine that was built by Copen that was there to look for minerals. And of course, you could use it for everything. But, almost everyone that was involved in radionics from its inception, from Dr. Albert Abrams, MD, was for healing people, because that's always been the need. I always people say, "Oh, it's terrible, all the sickness, the bad soils, and everything else we have here." But people have been dying since the beginning of time, and a lot have been dying. So it's not like we're only sick today. I do think we've reached a peak and then are going down now in our health. But that's what it's for. So I was the first one to really offer these. This information came out in different literature, particularly what's called psionics, which was basically a science fiction term. Writers write about the power of the mind and using tools and so forth. But, metaphysical use of radionics was just not out there or talked about much until IGOS came out with it. And of course, the first person to write about this was a guy called Charles Casamato, who wrote these little books, which were basically sold a few copies, but never really caught on that much. But we picked these things up. We published a whole bunch of other stuff in this area and fostered the use of it for personal empowerment. Because the bottom line is that everybody needs tools. We make tools. Those tools then make machines. That's the reason why we are the usurper race out there. Not necessarily smart, it's just that we're able to do that because whatever achievements we have, we're so mentally ill that we mess it up. So the whole idea is that, and what does that mean? Now, the problem that came into as soon as I was getting involved in this and studying it heavily, and I'm the foremost expert in the world now, I have every type of machine that's been made out there since the 1920s, just about, not everyone, but the major manufacturers, Delaware, Abrams, SE5s, I have all these things, Hieronymus, you name it, I have all these classic machines, and they're beautiful. Copen of recent times, who else is out there? But, and what do the first thing you want to do with these things, and of course that's why they've called them black boxes, because it's mysterious inside. What's in there? So, and that's right, what is in there? And that's the big question. So what was the first thing that a lot of people do? Is the first thing you do when you get one of these mysterious boxes is you open it up and look at it. Well, what's in there? Well, the designs of these technologies have varied over the years with manufacturers, and it's a long discussion. I'm going to kind of break it down into short chunks here as we go on. And of course, I do have a mini radionic course, which I haven't finished, talking about this in greater detail and who the people were involved with it. So, to keep that in mind, what makes everything work? And I think this is critical in a lot of ways, and also as a recent lecture I just posted, all these radionic practitioners, almost all of them except one that I can find as of recent, has all died young. So the bottom line is, what is going on there? And of course, everybody criticizes technologies because the person using it may not be in the best of shape. Well, there is a conundrum, if that's the right term, of that when you're a healer and you're active, you're into what you're doing. You're tired. You're working so much for other people. You think, oh, well, how come you're not clearing? You don't. You don't take care. I do the same thing myself. So I know the trap here. I'm helping so many people, I tend not to help myself or even my immediate family. This is something that everybody does. You do it, you're helping others, you're too busy, then you're too tired, etc. So this is probably, and if you look at healers, I would say that a lot of healers have not really lived that long or even have died young. But the point is what is this technology? So, is it strictly just a crutch? And of course, that's how these things tend to look at this point. The circuitry involved in all these machines are very simplistic, but that doesn't mean that they're not powerful. But there definitely is no electronic components to this, meaning the electricity is not doing anything to move, contain energies, etc. Not to any large degree. Now, the person who's very active in this, Ruth Drown, who was an electronic person, made very, very simple machines. Basically, you're talking about potentiometers connected to wires, maybe a resistor here or two, and then go to plates. That's it. So, to understand the layout of a radionic machine, all you have to do is go and find a schematic of a crystal radio. It's identical. And why am I bringing this up? Well, maybe I don't care, just give me something to work. Well, it's not quite that simple, especially for research. What makes these machines work for you? And how can we amplify them? Now, we've broken through most of these problems now completely on our own with no help, because what people are doing is nothing. They're producing the same old machines. They may add a little bit here or there. They may want to computerize it, make it into software, all this kind of stuff. And we really don't know if any of this has any value. I haven't seen any great achievements through anybody using software programs, which are out there. Matter of fact, until I research and find out that there's some effectiveness to it, I have no value for anything that's computerized, because you're taking out that human commitment. The more you filter the machine, the more you turn it over to a machine process, you're taking out what makes radionics work. And let's talk about that right now, because I'm going to keep this short. They are conscious, which is why I've moved away from the term radionics. They are consciousness machines. They work on human consciousness. Now, human consciousness can be transferred into a number. It can be translated into a state, but ultimately a shape, crystals, other things. You can put human consciousness in there. You can even put human consciousness into apparently some sort of computer memory type things. Now, so the whole idea is still human consciousness. And does computerizing something make it more powerful or make it less powerful? Is it more difficult to access the human consciousness fields of energies when they're in a component, which is made up of a lot of electrical components are made up from natural products? I'm not sure people understand that. Different minerals, metals, etc. And there are different things that resonate energies, like tubes and amplifiers called valves on the continent. These are fascinating. And valves, of course, tubes are precursors to lasers. So there's something here, and there's a certain resonance to these things that are produced through tubes. And everyone knows this who's got any kind of real sensitivities. Musicians, people who play music, are well aware of the value of using tube amplification. The sound is much better. So plain and simple. And this is noted by almost anybody. What does that mean? Why doesn't solid state work better? We've always been told how much better it is over them primitive tubes. Well, it is better for certain functions, but not for energetic informational fields. That's why the use of actual tube amplifiers is so critical. So, for the proper amplification. But what are we to look of these things? Now, I've opened all these machines. I have an original Hieronymus machine, which is tube-based from the 1950s. And everybody has their little gimmicky thing they put in there, but does it mean anything? The bottom line is almost all of these machines are extremely simplistic. The process is consciousness-based with the slight amplification and assist of certain components in there. And of course, dials. What do dials do? Well, it's hard to do a dial. Everything you do in a dial in your mind, it seems to me that that's a fatiguing process, which is unnecessary. Use a tool. Now, I could probably hammer a nail in with my fist and go into a giant psychic state to do that. Take an hour to do it. Yeah, but I did it. I didn't need a hammer. Well, to me, that's stupid. Hammer, you do it in what? Less than 10 seconds? Bump, 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 done, next. Why would you do that? So the whole idea is that people are looking for some sort of ego value from it. I'm looking for results. So what's in these machines? And, one of the things I had a problem with and why I think I was only a member of the Psychotronic Association for 1 year or so, was that they had these meetings. That's basically an organization that has been defunct. It's coming back now, to a certain degree, taken over by a new person who seems to be a good understanding of this area, who's been involved with it for many years. She seems to be well grounded, but I'm not sure where the organization is going. These things get lost and it's hard to bring them back. But whatever, in terms of that, but they had events every year where they would get together with people, and it was the Psychotronic Association. It's almost like calling yourself a psychotronics is another word for radionic or machine-based technologies based on this. So, but there was nothing there talking about psychotronics. It was sound waves. It was Hertzian frequencies. It was so many other things that were involved in all of these processes. Every single one of them. So, and they don't talk anything about the guts, or you'll have people selling, oh, most of the best machine that there is, blah, blah, blah. And everybody's built some machines, and some of them are quite attractive, but the guts of them, and then, of course, more and more dials makes it more and more powerful, right? Well, that again is a misnomer, because who can dial that? The fatigue factor is mind-screwing. And, it's like everything. I wonder if anybody's ever done dialing in of 10 or 15 dials. It's very tiring because you're using core energies on top of it. But what is it that makes them work? And the answer to that is none of these people know. One of the most famous builders for many years, he has passed away like most radionic practitioners who reached past 60, was Bruce Copen. He makes beautiful machines, or that's right, in terms of beautiful, not in the way they work, but in the way they look. These are beautifully constructed machines. There's no doubt about it. Well made, well put together in every aspect. And, but to test him out initially, because again, these machines are not inexpensive. I do have many now, but in the past, what did I do? Well, he had a base single dial unit that he sold for like $150. I said, well, let me look at it. What is it? So that's what I ordered and got the machine. Now, there was very, very little inside of it. It had a silver plate on the top of it. I should say not a silver, a stainless steel. I think that's it would be chrome plated, I guess, on the top of that stainless steel. And an on and off switch with a light and one dial. Okay? Now, but the bottom line is most machines, whether you buy a 1 dial or a 50 dial, the concept is still the same. There may be extra benefits depending on what it is, but we don't know that. So, what was it? Well, so I took it apart, very simple, to look at it, and of course, there was some minor circuitry in there. Now, what I came to find out is the circuitry that was in there was a surplus ROM panel. So it was just so you just went out and buy an electric. Because if you open up a device, and I used to do this, make devices that didn't have these gimmicks in it. The one problem with the actual circuit boards and stuff is usually it's loaded with toxic chemicals, toxic metals. There's 78 toxic metals in your average computer. I don't know if that's changed, so I really wanted to avoid that. There's lead and all these other things, and you're using subtle energy machines, and that's another thing people don't understand. You're using subtle energy. This is subtle energy physics you're talking about, and we should really start calling it that instead of calling it radionics and other things which don't really equate in this day and age. Radionics is a term we're not sure. Ruth Drown really liked it because she thought radio waves were being put off. But apparently that term was used way before that. But I'm not sure if it was used in this context. Radionics got thrown into radios, which have been around for quite some time. So that term, you'll see radionics all over the place. Radionic kits, electrical kits to make scientific projects. So this is not unusual. This was in the 50s and 60s, which had absolutely nothing to do with radionics. So it's really a bad term, but that's what everybody understands. It's subtle energy physics. These are consciousness-based machines. Now, the reason I repeat that is if you don't get that, you don't understand what this technology is. So the point is, what was in that box? Well, I'll tell you what was in that box. Well, it had an electrical cord. It had a light on the outside as well with an on and off switch. I don't know, did I mention that? But the electrical cord went to power the light. It didn't go to the circuitry whatsoever. You plugged it in, you clicked the switch, and the light came on. So that's otherwise known as an idiot light. But this was telling the customer that, hey, something's going on here. Yeah, that's right. The light's lighting up. But you think differently. So, I had machines where I didn't have lights on them. And people, is it on? Oh, is it working? I don't get it. And my toaster has a light. So the whole idea is that, yeah, and I understand that. I think that as a consciousness person, we need mental triggers so that we buy into what's happening there instead of blocking it. So that's part of the process, whether it does anything or not. And, how do you know if the machine is on? That's right. You click it on, now you know it's on. You're starting the process. But essentially, so the electrical cord went to a switch, the switch turned the light on. The actual surplus part, which was actually from a CD-ROM apparently, that was inserted into the box and connected to the plate, made no sense whatsoever. There's no power going to it. It did nothing. So what you're talking about here, and here was a well-made little unit, and I found out that all of Kopin's machines were basically the same. He'd put in a whole bunch of circuit boards filled with toxic metals, and these had absolutely nothing to do except to fool the person who bought the machine to think this was a complicated electronic process, when really it had nothing to do with anything. So it just had the basic in and out plates that were connected to dials that you turned and tuned in. Well, isn't that interesting? So that's all it is. And this is from a very credible guy. As I said, he's probably some of the nicest units ever built. Are Copeland units in terms of their attractiveness and their steampunk appeal that I like. All these dials and stuff. It's fun, but we're not talking about fun here. We're talking about the essence of life. Now, I've developed a whole new line of technology that will be coming out relatively soon. We hope to have a base unit coming out, which will be affordable to everyone, that uses some basic principles of how all this technology works, including photonic energy based. So the whole idea is, how do we do that? So we have got these down, and we will be coming out soon. But what is it? What's this technology? So they never talk about it. The Psychotronica Association didn't talk about it. I got bored of that. I was there to find out what made machines work, and they're talking about, colors and regular Rife frequencies and just about everything else in the alternative healing and New Age area. But there was never any discussion of what a radionic machine was. And while there were certain books with plans in them, well, none of this stuff really showed you anything of any great value. How were they amplifying? What does the circuitry mean? Now, Abrams, of course, built machines that were totally bogus as well. There was really nothing in there. And I think what he came to the conclusion is that he built some complicated machines initially, and then he built and found out that these machines worked okay. Then he had machines that were very primitive, just dials with some goop in it, and these worked just as well. So he never admitted it, because if he was to come out and say, well, this is a psychic process, he'd really be laughed out of the industry. So what he did is put together these crutch devices, which were psychically based, but really didn't do anything. And of course, there's a whole bunch of machines he made. Some had actual or frequency generators as well. So it's kind of a mishmash of all of these things of what's going on. And of course, he died young from some sort of virus that went through, some sort of flu. So the whole idea is that, but this is not looked at. And we need to look at all this stuff and find out what these is. We've gone past all this stuff. What's being put out there is a bunch of mishmash of garbage. People are putting regular Hertzian fields through radionic machines. Well, what is the point of that? I don't quite understand that. People are trying to broadcast Hertzian fields directly to you. In terms of at a distance, where you put hair and fingernails in there, and this supposedly then changes you. Well, we don't know. There probably is a transfer of some sort from there. But, we're getting away from the essence of what it's all about, and that's subtle energy physics. We want to not produce Hertzian traditional fields. We want to produce energetic informational field that forms matter, changes matter, changes lead into gold, that changes a physical illness structure into a health generating structure. And this is not going to be done with all these other pseudo energies, because they are not the essence of it. Ultimately, the informational energetic field is creating the all other fields, whether that field is tachyons, whether that field is Hertzian, no matter what it is. What is the ultimate matter of the universe? And that's the occultons. And and you can control these through consciousness-based machines. That's what's so mind-blowing here. And it can get down to extreme levels. Now, certain breakthroughs have already been done, which we're looking into and seeing how we can incorporate that in a much more sophisticated tool than's being offered now. Our tools are extremely sophisticated because you have to use photonic energies to carry these informational energetic fields because they are humongous in nature. So it gets back to the fact of old computers which had to be put in giant buildings to process simple data. Well, that's where we're at again, trying to process informational energetic fields. Well, how do you change that? Well, we know how to change that now. But this is the big question. So people keep going into computerized systems. They go into so many other types of systems. They get very simplistic. Most things are very simplistic. If you get the average machine out there, it's basically the Ruth Drown system. What people have added in to make it a little fancier is to add in this energy components, often called orgone, to kind of make that. But I don't think any of that stuff does anything. As a matter of fact, you have to be careful what you're amplifying with, that it doesn't hold negative energy or that it doesn't accumulate energy from the atmosphere, which is what orgone does. Orgone is highly questionable to use in these areas. It's a fascinating area, and Rife did some amazing work. And I think it has some potential, but there's a huge amount of problems there. But the point is that you're still using a traditional machine no matter what you put in it, whether you put crystals or orgone or anything else in there. What are you doing? Well, you're amplifying what? Well, you're amplifying the signal you're putting in there. So it's still a step two. Step one is the energy that's going into a machine. Now, what is that? Is there strictly an empowerment from the pattern, meaning the wires connected? Well, there is something to that. That's called a sigil. That's called a shape vibrational energetic field. You could say that a shape vibration, for people to understand that better, is a pyramid. So it doesn't matter what you make the pyramid out of, it produces energy. So these are the things we need to look at and are not looked at and have never been. Nobody wants to talk about the guts of things. I think it's a two-edged sword. I think, number one, people don't want to give out what they think of the secrets, but I think they're lost. People don't want to give their technology out. They don't want to share what they're doing. And this is a problem in anything alternative. And of course, this is the capitalistic business model as well. I've had this problem with people for many years, particularly alternative energy people. They refuse to share what they know, not because of the fact that they're afraid of the energy. They won't share it because they want to get their money out of it. So if they can't get money out of it, they don't care. And they're going, and most of these people have went to their grave with this and never made anything from it. You should just put it on the table and let people do it. If you've got some special information, share it with others. So, because it's never going to go anywhere. And if the oil companies want you dead, you're going to be dead. They do this all over the world, so it's not exactly shocking. So the whole idea is we need to know what makes this work. What is the process? Now, I'm going to be explaining this and explaining in the future here, writing my subtle energy physics books, courses, etc. This will give you the secrets to the universe. Now, they're still not refined enough to do everything, but this is the core. This is the quantum physics reality. This is the Einstein equation that will change the nature of reality. And it's all about subtle energy physics and the controlling of informational energetic fields that create all matter and tell matter what to do. How do you do that? Does it sound like it's complicated? You need a $10 million instrument? I'm afraid not. You can do it pretty easily to all sorts of levels. And anytime you manifest with any type of radionic machine, that's exactly what you're doing. Now, are there easier, faster, and more empowered ways of doing it? You're damn right there is, and we know of lots of this, and we're trying to put out technologies to start off here, some great basic technology, which hopefully will be affordable. One of the problems is, these machines are not necessarily skyrocketing in price. If you want to put out a really high quality machine, it's with all the components, which are fortunately have come down in price, but everything is costly when you want to put high quality in something. So the point is, you can easily have a machine that's running anywhere from $3,000 to $7,000 for a professional model. Well, I mean, that's a lot of money. And highly recommended if it does what it's supposed to do. It's going to be something that is your most valuable tool in life that you will ever have, because it will ensure your empowerment in the physical monetary world as well as in the physical well-being world. Can you put a price on that? You know how expensive a simple little operation is if you go into a hospital, whether it's covered or not, but you could spend $5,000 or $10,000 on a very small operation of other things. So if you have to spend $5,000 on a very high quality machine that is going to increase your well-being and produce lots of money, well, that's kind of a bargain, especially since you're using it for the rest of your life. But these are things that have to be looked at. We have in development right now machines that will be much less expensive, but are going to do a pretty damn good job. Based in cutting-edge technologies that are close to being put out there at a reasonable price. So we're going to have to see how all this goes in terms of the release. But the point is, we'll explain how these work. Okay? And we'll tell you what subtle energy physics is all about. So we got to get away from this radionic. I mean, just saying that word, you think of radiation, something emanating out, which is not. These are not those kind of fields. Subtle informational, energetic informational energy fields are not radiating energy in a traditional fashion. So when you think about that, you think of radios and other things. It's a real bad term, but the idea is, how do you change that? Well, hopefully my book will change that as we get into consciousness machines and, of course, subtle energy physics. As we understand, we know exactly what's happening now in general. I don't know if we ever know what's going on because we're just too stupid of a species. And we have everybody kicking us in the bottom every time you come up with something new or different. You're an idiot. Instead of embracing it and say, gee, let's look there. How does this pertain to what we're doing? How do we make something better that we're working on now, taking these concepts? I mean, that's what theoretical physics is all about, but theoretical physicists are not theoretical at all. They're making up stuff based in their conception of things, which is pathetic. So the whole idea is that this is what we need to look at to find out what these energies are so that we can handle the next level of science, which we are coming out with right now. So it's a very exciting time that we've broke. Now, we've been experimenting with these things for years. There's been cost problems with lasers that used to be very expensive. Now you can get these lasers that transfer huge amounts of information unbelievably cheap. All of this has now helped bring it used to be $7,000-8,000 for the lasers you can get now for $5. Shocking. So the whole idea is that these things are now available to start getting this advanced technology. But there's a bunch of steps other than that. There's a bunch of steps of how do you do things? How do you transfer energy? How is this all done? So, and there are more materialistic ways, which we always combine, which I think are important, at least to the operator, if nothing else, and things that are much less materialistic in terms of things that are using this energetic fields. So it's an exciting time, but what is in it? What makes these things? What's going on? Never is talked about by anybody. People talk about results they get. They talk about a bunch of double talk. Well, when you open up a machine, particularly for manufacturers, what makes it work? Well, some people say it's their scalar antennas that are sending these energies out there. Well, that's as best as we can tell right now. And of how this works from one particular manufacturer. I think that's the SE5 people who uses these more scalar antennas. Now they're talking about using holograms to hold certain energies. So these are the two areas of supposedly how these things work, but most traditional manufacturers never use scalar antennas. So this is not true of any of the older machines. None of the older machines have scalar-based antennas in them. They're dial units. So this is something that's guts happen as scalar energy, its cliche-ish statement that it is, has become popular in the last 30, 40 years. So certainly scalar, an interesting term which supposedly is super empowered, there's something to that. How much? We don't know. But nobody talks about the guts, and you'll never find any book that talks about guts. And everybody's trying to hide their process. There's a few new processes out there, so it is rumored by people who think they do so much, but they're not talking about it. And of course, they seem to be very afraid to do anything. Well, this is not going to get anybody anywhere, and I think that people can talk more frankly without necessarily getting into trouble. So as we understand all these things, we need to move into the next level. All technologies as we know them today, called radionics, are all backwards. They have a misunderstanding of what's going on. They're using basically, which is 120-year-old technology, and there's no advancement in it. Plain and simple. Of course, that technology works to a certain level and is very user dependent and takes a lot of skill to dial in a radionic machine properly. It takes a lot of skill. So that's another fallacy that people want to say it's so easy. Well, it's not easy, and using rubbing techniques and so forth, I've never been a big fan of. I don't think they're good enough to get raised. But then we're getting into this whole doesn't matter, it's just wires. Well, I think it does matter. And we're not trying to just get general results. We're trying to get really advanced, potent results. So we need to develop the technology to do that, plain and simple. And, of course, it is here. It's just a matter of refining it. Apparently, nobody else gets it. And this is a problem with the industry. But that's always been the case. So with that, I hope people understand the process, and this is part one. We'll start talking about the guts even more in part two.